Everyone thinks Inside Out is a cute movie about feelings. Wrong. It is a terrifying documentary proving that free will is a lie. Riley is just a meat puppet.
Yeah, it completely dismantles
Yeah.
the most fundamental comfort we have as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
The illusion that you are the author of your own life.
Exactly.
And when you look at the architecture of this cinematic universe through a rigorous academic lens, I mean, the implications are genuinely horrifying.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are putting on our cognitive psychologist and dystopian film theorist hats. We're looking at a fascinating, intensely provocative source report titled The Architecture of Emotional Fascism.
Biological subjugation in the Inside Out universe.
Right, that's the subtitle. And our mission today isn't to look at the pretty colors or, laugh at the physical comedy. We are going to strip away the Pixar aesthetic entirely.
Completely, entirely.
We're breaking down both films using deterministic philosophy, clinical psychology, and dystopian theory.
Which means we have to ask you, the listener, to brace yourself. Because if you've ever had that fleeting, uncanny sensation that you aren't entirely in control of your own actions.
Oh, that terrifying autopilot feeling.
Exactly. Like you're just watching yourself say something or do something and you can't stop it. Well, this deep dive is going to validate that fear. Through the lens of this report, we're not examining a magical inner world. We're examining an airtight biological prison.
So consider this your trigger warning for a ruined childhood. Let's unpack this right from the foundational premise. The source report establishes a baseline horror for the Inside Out universe, and it hinges on this concept of the meat puppet hypothesis.
Right.
It argues that Riley, the girl we are supposedly identifying with as the protagonist, is not a conscious, autonomous being.
Not even slightly. I mean, the report posits that Riley is a biological automaton, an unelected meat puppet governed by a council of dictatorial homunculi.
And just to clarify for everyone, homunculus is just a philosophical term for like a little person inside a brain.
Yeah, but here, it's not a metaphor. Every word Riley speaks, every belief she holds, every tear she sheds, none of it originates from her. It is all the result of non-consensual, chemical button pressing by microscopic entities she doesn't even know exist.
Which is wild because that framing completely flips the genre of the film.
Oh, totally.
We watch the movie and think headquarters is this quirky, chaotic workplace where Riley's emotions are just, trying their best. But if we accept the report's premise, what we are actually witnessing is the total, unmitigated eradication of human agency.
Yes.
Riley has no more say in her life than a car has a say in where it's being driven.
To really understand why this is so philosophically disturbing, I think we need to look at how we've historically thought about the mind. There's a philosopher named Daniel Dennett who wrote extensively about this.
Right, Dennett.
Yeah, he spent a lot of his career aggressively critiquing the remnants of dualism in modern thought. Now, dualism, which was famously championed by René Descartes centuries ago, is the idea that the mind and the physical body are two completely separate things.
Like there's a ghost in the machine.
Exactly. That there is an immaterial soul pulling the strings of the physical brain.
Right, and modern neuroscience has essentially thrown out the immaterial soul part. Like, we know thoughts are electrical and chemical signals.
But Dennett argued that even though we threw out the soul, we accidentally kept the structural flaw of Descartes' model. He called this enduring fallacy the Cartesian theater.
I love this concept so much. But before we apply it to Riley, what does the Cartesian theater actually look like in a real-world, practical sense? Like, how do regular people fall into this trap?
Well, Dennett actually used the Cartesian theater as a mocking, sarcastic metaphor. He pointed out that even highly educated people still unconsciously imagine that there is a tiny, localized observer sitting somewhere inside their brain.
Sitting in the dark.
Right. They imagine this tiny observer sitting in a dark room, watching a movie screen of sensory inputs coming from the eyes and ears, and then deciding how to react.
Which, to be fair, feels intuitively true to us. Like, when I'm deciding what to eat for breakfast, it really feels like I'm a little guy in my head weighing the options between oatmeal and eggs.
It feels true, but logically it's a disaster. Dennett mocked it because it creates what philosophers call an infinite regress.
An infinite regress?
Yeah, think about the mechanics of it. If there is a little person in your head watching a screen and making decisions, well, how does that little person process information?
Oh, wow.
Right. Do they have an even tinier brain with an even tinier person inside watching a microscopic screen? And does that tiny person have an even tinier person? It just goes on forever. It explains absolutely nothing about consciousness. It just passes the buck to a smaller entity.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting. Dennett uses the Cartesian theater to point out how ridiculous and unscientific we are for thinking about the human brain this way. But the creators of this cinematic universe didn't reject this flawed, mocked philosophical model.
No, they didn't.
They took it literally. They weaponized an infinite regress and presented it as undeniable, objective reality for this universe.
They built an entire cosmology out of Dennett's joke. I mean, the emotions, joy, sadness, anger, literally stand in a dark room in front of a giant screen, watching Riley's life unfold and pulling physical levers to make her move.
It's exactly like playing a video game. But imagine if the avatar on the screen, let's say Mario genuinely believed he was deciding to jump over a pit.
Right.
He has this whole internal narrative, like, I assessed the danger, I calculated the distance, and I chose to leap. He is completely oblivious to the teenagers sitting on a couch, holding the controller, pressing the A button. Mario isn't choosing anything.
He's just executing code.
Exactly. Riley is Mario. Riley is the avatar.
And that control console they use in headquarters is the purest, most terrifying instrument of biological determinism. Through this lens, biological determinism is the absolute rule of law. It's the concept that all behavior is entirely dictated by innate biological factors, neurochemistry, genetics, rather than any semblance of free choice. When Joy presses the yellow button, Riley's facial muscles contort into a smile. When anger pulls a red lever, her vocal cords constrict, her lungs push air, and she yells. The host organism cannot make a single independent choice.
Let me stop you right there because I want to make sure we are grasping the absolute horror of this. She doesn't decide to be angry.
No.
It's not that a situation happens, Riley assesses it and chooses an angry response. Anger, the homunculus, decides he is angry, he pulls the lever, and Riley's physical body is forced to execute the command.
That's the core of the subjugation. And the report connects this brilliantly to the work of real-world neuroscientist Georgi Bousaki. He's written extensively critiquing empirical philosophy, arguing that the brain is not just a passive organ taking in the world and representing it. In the context of the film's universe, Bousaki's theories take on a really dark twist. Riley's conscious awareness only kicks in retroactively.
Retroactively. Okay, so she screams at her parents at the dinner table, and then what happens?
Then her brain scrambles to create a narrative justification for the neurochemical automation that just hijacked her body.
Oh, man.
Anger pulled the lever. The scream happened. A fraction of a second later, Riley's consciousness, the illusion of the self, wakes up and says, "Oh, I yelled because I'm frustrated about moving to San Francisco. Free will is nothing but a coping mechanism."
That is so bleak.
It's a fictional story she tells herself after the fact to make sense of the biological commands she was forced to execute.
So what does this all mean for Riley's lived experience? Because we are raised to think of the human mind as the ultimate sanctuary. Your body might be constrained by gravity or by society, but your thoughts are your own. No one can see inside your head.
Supposedly.
But this report destroys that sanctuary. It introduces a totally different architectural framework for the mind, and it draws heavily on the French philosopher Michel Foucault.
Yes. The report uses Foucault's analysis of the Panopticon to explain the physical structure of headquarters. To give you some context, the Panopticon wasn't actually Foucault's invention. It was originally a prison design conceptualized by Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th century.
Right.
Picture a massive circular prison. All the inmate cells are lined up along the outer wall with the bars facing inward, and right in the center of the circle is a single, darkened watchtower.
So the guards in the tower can look out and see into any cell at any moment.
Exactly. But the psychological genius and, honestly, the intense cruelty of Bentham's design is the lighting. The inmates can never see into the tower. They never know if a guard is actually looking at them or if the tower is completely empty.
Because you can't verify if you're being watched. You just have to assume you are always being watched.
You internalize the surveillance. Foucault picked up on this in his book Discipline and Punish. He realized that the Panopticon wasn't just a building. It was the perfect diagram for how modern societal power operates. You don't need to chain someone to a wall if you can make them police their own behavior out of sheer paranoia. We regulate ourselves because we feel the invisible disciplinary gaze of society upon us.
But the report takes this a step further, doesn't it? It argues that headquarters isn't a traditional panopticon. It calls it an inverted panopticon.
It has to be inverted because of the geography of the mind. In a regular panopticon, the power structure surrounds you. The state, the guards, society, they are on the outside looking in at you. But in Riley's biological panopticon, The watchtower is embedded inside the subject.
Headquarters is the tower.
Headquarters is the tower. The homunculi stand in the dark, looking out through the ultimate peripheral windows, Riley's own eyes.
And this is where I really have to push back on our typical everyday fears of a dystopian surveillance state. Whenever we talk about surveillance, we always imagine Big Brother watching us from the outside.
Right, a camera in a street corner.
Exactly. We worry about CCTV or our smartphones listening to our conversations to sell us ads. But Foucault, in his wildest, darkest moments, couldn't have predicted this absolute ontological horror. Big Brother isn't a camera on a pole. Big Brother is literally hiding behind your optic nerve.
Wow, yeah.
It's a biological domination where you aren't even given the dignity of knowing you're a prisoner. Riley can look outward at the world, but she can never, ever look inward to see the wardens controlling her.
And we must recognize that her wardens are fundamentally unyielding machines themselves. Which brings us back to Buzaki and what he calls the syntax of action.
Okay, untack syntax of action for me, because that sounds like grammar, not biology.
It actually operates a lot like grammar. So in language, syntax is the strict set of rules governing how words can be arranged to make sense. You can't just throw verbs and nouns into a blender. In neuroscience, Buzaki argues that neural circuits have preset, inflexible patterns, a biological syntax. The report applies this to the entities inside headquarters, highlighting their pre-configured dynamics.
Wait, meaning the emotions don't have free will either?
They absolutely do not.
Oh, man.
It's an illusion of autonomy all the way down. The homunculi are just as trapped in algorithmic programming as Riley is. Joy is biologically programmed to seek pleasure and avoid pain. She cannot choose to be melancholic.
She literally can't.
No. Anger is algorithmically bound to seek justice and react aggressively to unfairness. He cannot choose to be forgiving. They are entirely incapable of deviating from their hard-coded nature.
So it's not even a council of free-thinking beings making choices for Riley. The entire biological machine is just a cascade of deterministic dominoes. An environmental stimulus hits the optic nerve. It triggers the pre-programmed algorithm of an emotion. The emotion pulls a lever and the meat puppet moves. It's physics masquerading as personality.
Which forces us to critically reevaluate the events of the first film. Because if Riley is just a vessel and the entities fighting for control of her console are driven by rigid, inflexible mandates, then we aren't watching a quirky workplace comedy.
No, we are definitely not.
We are watching political actors fighting for absolute control of a sovereign state.
And that means we have to put the so-called hero of the story under the microscope. We need to talk about Joy.
The report doesn't call her a hero, by the way. It refers to her as the autocrat. The autocrat.
Which is so jarring because the film does everything in its power to make you love Joy. She's painted in this luminous, glowing yellow light. She's peppy, she's proactive, she has a bouncy voice, and she constantly claims she just wants what is best for Riley.
Right.
But when you apply this dystopian lens, that facade completely disintegrates. Joy isn't the hero. She is a fascist dictator enforcing a regime of toxic positivity. She literally takes a piece of chalk, draws a tiny circle on the floor, and forces sadness to stand inside it so she can't touch the controls.
It's brutal.
It's not a quirky disagreement. It's blatant censorship and emotional oppression.
It is a profound, terrifying illustration of political and emotional subjugation. Joy has seized the means of production, the console, and operates under the strict, uncompromising mandate of toxic positivity. This is the pathological belief that no matter how dire, traumatic, or painful a situation is, an individual must maintain a superficially positive mindset.
Which, if you look at actual clinical psychology, is incredibly dangerous.
It's devastating to the human system. The report cites extensive psychological literature on this. Forcing positivity doesn't make things better. It makes the organism underestimate genuine threats.
Yeah.
When you mandate happiness during a crisis, you drastically increase the likelihood of clinical depression, severe anxiety disorders, and actual physiological illness. The stress hormones don't just vanish. They rot the body from the inside out.
Because you aren't actually dealing with the problem. Imagine having a broken leg and instead of setting the bone, a doctor just tapes a smiley face sticker over the compound fracture and tells you to walk it off. That's what Joy is doing to Riley's psyche.
Precisely the right analogy. By physically quarantining sadness, by literally drawing a chalk outline and threatening her she steps out of it, Joy is initiating a psychological dysfunction. The report explicitly states this drives cortical abnormalities.
Okay, translate cortical abnormalities for us. What is physically happening in the brain when Joy does this?
Well, the cortex is the outer layer of the brain, heavily involved in high-level processing, like emotion, memory, and problem-solving. When you artificially suppress a negative emotion like grief over moving across the country, the neural pathways meant to process that grief are blocked. The emotional energy is diverted into the sympathetic nervous system.
Which triggers fight or flight.
Exactly. It forces the body into a state of chronic stress. Joy isn't preventing pain. She is weaponizing it into a biological hazard that actually raises the organism's mortality rate.
It is literal state censorship. And her authoritarianism is even more obvious when you look at how she handles the core memories. In the lore of the film, these are the bright, glowing orbs that power the islands of personality, things like Hockey Island, Family Island, Honesty Island. These islands fundamentally define who the meat puppet is. And in the beginning of the film, if you look closely, every single one of those core memories is glowing yellow.
Joy has systematically monopolized the foundational pillars of the host's identity.
It's chilling. We see her hoarding these yellow orbs, physically snatching them away if sadness even gets near them out of fear that she might change their color. Think about the historical parallel here. It is exactly like a dictator controlling state media and purging historical archives out of a deep paranoia of revisionism.
Absolutely.
She is doctoring the history book so the citizen Riley only remembers the glorious state-approved triumphs of the regime.
To really grasp the philosophical weight of this state-sponsored delusion, the report points us to Edmund Husserl. He's the founder of a branch of philosophy called phenomenology. Husserl argued that to engage with the world authentically, we must experience phenomena of things as they appear in our consciousness, as they truly are, without masking them or overlaying false assumptions.
Okay.
Phenomenological reality demands that if a situation is inherently tragic, it must be experienced as tragic.
We need an analogy here. So phenomenological reality is basically like a smoke alarm in your house. If there's a fire, the alarm should go off. It's unpleasant, it's loud, it hurts your ears, but it reflects the true state of reality. The house is burning.
Yes. And in this analogy, Joy is systematically walking around the house, taking the batteries out of the smoke alarms while the curtains are engulfed in flames, and insisting the warmth is just a nice summer breeze. Joy fundamentally denies phenomenological reality.
Because Riley just experienced a massive trauma. She moved from rural Minnesota to a cramped house in San Francisco. She lost her childhood home. She lost her best friend. She lost her hockey team. Her entire world was upended.
The phenomenological reality of that event is grief. Mourning is the biologically appropriate response. But Joy steps in and functions as a tyrannical superego.
Freud's concept.
Right. Now, to borrow from Sigmund Freud, the superego is the moralizing, critical, perfectionist part of the human psyche. It internalizes societal rules and demands compliance. Joy forbids Riley from authentically mourning. Instead, she forces Riley to perform what sociologists call emotional labor.
Emotional labor, acting happy for the benefit of others.
Exactly. Joy looks at the screen, sees Riley's stressed parents, and demands that Riley put on a brave face, be their happy girl, and smile through the trauma. Riley is held hostage to a state-sanctioned psychological profile. She is not allowed to exist as a grieving child. She is forced to be a propaganda tool for Joy's regime.
It is emotional fascism. The message is, conform to the state's required mood, or your personality islands will literally crumble into the abyss, which, let's be honest, is exactly what happens.
It is.
The entire biological infrastructure collapses under the weight of Joy's unachievable propaganda. Speaking of that abyss, we need to leave the watchtower of headquarters and look at the vast geography of the rest of the brain. We need to talk about long-term memory.
This is where the theoretical cruelty of the cognitive dictatorship manifests as structural physical violence.
In standard clinical psychology, there is a concept called synaptic pruning. It is usually described as a very natural, benign, even helpful process. When you are a toddler, your brain forms billions of neural connections, way more than you actually need. As you grow and learn, the brain passively lets the unused connections wither away.
Right.
It's just biological housekeeping, ensuring the important pathways like walking or language can fire faster and more efficiently.
Yes, it is the cornerstone of standard neuroplasticity. The brain optimizing its own hardware to adapt to its environment.
But the film does not depict this as a passive natural seeding. It depicts synaptic pruning as active, deliberate, and violent erasure. We are introduced to these gelatinous little characters called the mind workers. They walk through the endless, towering labyrinth of long-term memory, dragging giant vacuum cleaners.
The report pulls no punches here. It characterizes the mind workers as the regime's silent executioners. They are an unthinking, unfeeling, secret police force. They patrol the memory stacks, and when they find a memory that is starting to fade, which, crucially, simply means the current regime in headquarters hasn't found it politically or emotionally useful recently, they vacuum it up and discard it into the memory dump.
And we have to be clear about what the memory dump is. Once a memory goes down there, it turns to ash. It disintegrates into nothingness. It is gone forever. There is no appeal process. There is no legal oversight.
None.
There is no moral accounting of what is being lost. The mine workers just look at a memory of 4-year-old Riley taking piano lessons, decide the state doesn't require this data anymore, and throw it in the incinerator.
It is the systemic industrial-scale curation of a person's history.
Okay.
And this analysis leads us to what is universally considered the most emotionally devastating moment in the first film. But through the lens of this report, it is also the darkest, most terrifying application of biological determinism we witness.
Oh, man. I know where we're going, and I am still heartbroken over this. We have to talk about Bing Bong.
We do.
For anyone who hasn't seen it or blocked it out due to trauma, Bing Bong was Riley's childhood imaginary friend. He is this absurd, innocent amalgamation of a child's imagination, part elephant, part cat, part dolphin, made of pink cotton candy. He wanders the stacks of long-term memory, homeless, just desperately wanting to play with Riley one more time.
Yeah.
And through a series of accidents, he ends up trapped at the bottom of the memory dump with Joy.
The incinerator.
Right, the incinerator. And they're trying to escape. They find Bing Bong's old wagon, which is literally powered by singing, and they try to fly it out of the steep abyss. They try once and slide back down. They tried twice and fail. They are too heavy. So, on the final attempt, as the wagon is halfway up the cliff, Bing Bong looks down.
He does.
He does the math. He realizes his own weight is holding the wagon down, and he jumps out. He sacrifices himself so Joy can reach the top. Joy looks down into the abyss, and Bing Bong smiles. He says, "Take her to the moon for me, Joy." And then he turns to ash. He slowly fades into complete nothingness. It makes everyone, adults, kids, everyone sob uncontrollably.
It is undeniably a masterclass in emotional manipulation by the Pixar filmmakers. The swelling music, the lighting, the vocal performance. But we must strip the aesthetic away. Look at the cold, deterministic reality of the mechanics at play. Bing Bong's death wasn't a sweet, heroic sacrifice. It was an execution.
Wait, I have to push back. How can you call it an execution? He looked at the situation and made a voluntary choice to jump.
Did he? We just established that no entity in this universe has free will. They are pre-programmed algorithms. Bing Bong is an outdated piece of cognitive software. The system purged an obsolete file to optimize the host. He was erased from existence by a subconscious death squad that orchestrated a scenario where his deletion was inevitable.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts because it makes brutal, logical sense within the rules of the universe. We desperately want to frame it as a beautiful act of love. But in the cold, unfeeling math of biological determinism, he wasn't just softly forgotten by a growing girl. He was a psychological artifact from an old era of Riley's development.
Exactly.
The biological machine calculated his mass, assessed his utility, and deemed him an inefficient allocation of resources.
Zoom out and look at the state of the host. The biological system was in critical failure. Riley was shutting down, attempting to run away from home. The system desperately needed the autocrat Joy back at the console to stabilize the meat puppet for survival in the new environment of San Francisco. Joy's survival was mathematically necessary.
And Bing Bong's wasn't.
Bing Bong's was not. He was collateral damage in a biological optimization protocol.
He wasn't a hero. He was a bloated software file preventing a critical system reboot. Once he was deleted, the system had enough memory to recover. It proves that identity in this universe is entirely conditional.
Yes.
Think about what that means for you, the listener. If you are a memory, an imaginary friend, or even a piece of Riley's soul, you do not have inherent value. You only exist as long as the state deems you useful for the host's survival. The absolute moment you become a liability or dead weight, the system marches you to the edge and turns you to ash.
The absolute finality of the memory dump is what makes it so terrifying. It is a mass grave for the discarded pieces of a human being, a biological landfill where the self goes to be annihilated.
Okay, take a breath. Shake off the existential dread for a second because we have to move forward. If the first film is a case study in the collapse of a simple, emotionally stunted autocracy under Joy, the second film, Inside Out 2, introduces a completely new, far more insidious political paradigm.
It represents the evolution of the host's governance from a blunt autocracy to a highly sophisticated, hypervigilant technocracy.
Right, and this massive paradigm shift is triggered by a biological event, the puberty update.
Oh boy.
The film shows this as an emergency siren going off in headquarters. Suddenly, an external demolition crew breaks through the windows with wrecking balls. They rip out the old, simple console, demolish the existing architecture, and install a massive, incredibly complex new piece of hardware. And with this new hardware comes a new faction of emotions: embarrassment, ennui, envy, and their ringleader, anxiety.
To understand this through a developmental lens, the onset of puberty is perhaps the most volatile period of human neurodevelopment. The psychologist Erik Erikson defined this stage as a critical conflict of identity versus role confusion. The brain is radically rewiring itself. It is pruning massive amounts of gray matter and strengthening white matter tracks to prepare the organism for the lethal complexities of adult social survival.
Lethal complexities, I like that.
But the report argues that in the film, this biological imperative manifests as a literal hostile takeover.
It is completely ruthless. In the second movie, anxiety stages a literal military coup. She doesn't ask for a seat at the table. She throws the old regime in a vault and uses psychological warfare to brainwash Riley into believing she isn't good enough.
It is a swift, calculated decapitation of the existing government. Anxiety looks at Joy's simple mandate of toxic positivity and calculates, correctly, that it is woefully insufficient for surviving the brutal landscape of high school. High school requires hypervigilance, endless social calculation, and constant risk assessment.
Totally.
So anxiety doesn't bother engaging in democratic debate. She orchestrates a junta. She captures joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust, traps them in a giant glass jar, and physically exiles them from the seat of power.
She throws them into the Vault of Secrets, which, when you look past the whimsical animation, is a high-security prison for political dissidents.
It is indefinite detention without trial, a black site within the mind.
And look at the population of this black site. The old emotions aren't the only ones locked up. They are imprisoned alongside Riley's deepest repressed shame. You have a character literally named Dick Dark Secret, who is this hulking, chained brute of a figure.
Yeah, poor guy.
You have Bloofy, a 2D preschool cartoon dog that Riley is secretly terrified people will find out she still watches. And Lance Slashblade, a low-res, embarrassing video game character she has a crush on. Anxiety hasn't just locked up her political rivals, she has swept all of the state's embarrassing secrets into a dungeon.
This is a textbook example of shifting power dynamics, which Foucault would analyze heavily. There is a common historical fallacy that when an old authoritarian system is overthrown, the resulting revolution leads to freedom. But sociologists like Luc Boltanski and Eve Chiapello discuss this in their work on the new spirit of capitalism.
Okay, lay it on me.
They detail how critiques of old, rigid hierarchies are often absorbed by the system, only to create new, decentralized networks of control that are infinitely harder to escape. Foucault refers to this mechanism as the tactical polyvalence of discourse.
Whoa, okay, stop. Tactical polyvalence of discourse. I just imagine Foucault sitting in a turtleneck laughing at us. Translate that for me. What does that actually mean for a 13-year-old girl at a hockey camp?
Fair point. Let's ground it. Tactical polyvalence means that power doesn't just crush you from above. It is adaptable. It mutates. It takes your own arguments, your own rebellions, and uses them against you. Think about how a massive corporation will mass-produce and sell you a punk rock t-shirt, completely commodifying and neutralizing your anti-corporate rebellion.
Oh, they sell you the aesthetic of rebellion while profiting off your compliance.
Exactly. In the mind, anxiety uses the very real, demonstrable failures of Joy's toxic positivity to justify a regime that is far more invasive and draconian. Joy failed to protect Riley, so anxiety says, I'm the only one who can keep you safe. And by doing so, anxiety becomes the unquestioned supreme leader of the cognitive dictatorship. The state of emergency becomes the permanent rule of law.
And anxiety's methods of control are so much more insidious than Joy's. Joy was blunt. She relied on simple censorship: don't be sad, stand in this circle, be happy.
Right.
But anxiety operates in the shadows. Anxiety uses psychological warfare. She doesn't just manage the buttons on the console, she actively rewires the subterranean foundation of Riley's psyche. We have to dive into the mechanics of the belief system.
The belief system is depicted as a massive, echoing underground cavern beneath headquarters. Memories are pulled down into a pool, where they crystallize into these glowing, vibrating strings that stretch upward. These strings form Riley's core convictions about herself.
Yeah.
In clinical psychology, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, we refer to these as core beliefs. They are the deepest, most entrenched, mostly subconscious lenses through which a human being evaluates their own worth and the external world.
Think about your own core beliefs. I am capable, or people are generally untrustworthy. Under Doy's autocratic rule, Riley's core belief was a single, glowing white string that simply pulsed with the phrase, "I am a good person." It was pure, it was comforting, but maybe entering high school, it was a bit naive.
Anxiety absolutely identifies that naive self-assurance as a massive vulnerability. In the cutthroat, hyper-judgmental social hierarchy of a high school hockey camp, simply believing you are a good person will not protect you from being ostracized. So, anxiety doesn't just disagree with the core belief, she violently uproots it.
She does.
She literally grabs the glowing white string and rips it out of the bedrock of Riley's mind.
The destruction of the self. And what does she replace it with? This is where the horror truly peaks. Anxiety drafts the mind workers from Imagination Land. In the first movie, Imagination Land is a fun place building French fry forests. Anxiety turns it into a sweatshop of terror. She forces the workers to draw endlessly on giant whiteboards, projecting terrifying, catastrophic, worst-case scenarios up to the screens of headquarters.
It is the systemic weaponization of the human mind's predictive capabilities.
It's relentless. If you fail this hockey drill, the coach will hate you. If the coach hates you, you won't make the team. If you don't make the team, your old friends will abandon you and you will die alone.
The spiral.
Think about the last time you lay awake at 3 a.m., replaying a minor mistake you made at work, spiraling into a scenario where you lose your job and become destitute. That isn't you choosing to reflect. That is your own intelligence. Anxiety running a sweatshop in your mind, forcing you to watch horrors.
By force-feeding these terror scenarios into the waters of the belief system, anxiety cultivates a completely new, dark, jagged core belief. A harsh, vibrating orange string that dictates, "I am not good enough."
Wow.
This is not an exaggeration. This is the exact foundational pathology of almost all clinical anxiety disorders. The organism's baseline assumption becomes its own inadequacy.
I am not good enough. That becomes Riley's new operating system. And it fundamentally alters her physical behavior. It forces the meat puppet into frantic, desperate action. Because she believes she isn't good enough, Riley abandons her old, loyal friends. She completely changes her personality to mimic the older cool girls at the camp. She forces herself to laugh at jokes she doesn't actually think are funny. She lies about the bands she likes. She dyes a streak in her hair. She is entirely subjugated by this new, terrifying belief installed by the dictator.
Now, we must analyze the dictator's motivation here. Anxiety genuinely believes she is protecting Riley. Dictators rarely view themselves as villains. She believes these draconian measures, the sleep deprivation, the social manipulation, the destruction of the old identity, are strictly necessary for national security.
Right.
And in the context of puberty, national security means social integration and survival. But as in any complex system, the ruthless drive for hyper-optimization inevitably leads to a catastrophic system failure.
Which brings us to the agonizing climax of the second film, the final scrimmage of the hockey game. Riley, pushed to the absolute brink of physical and emotional exhaustion by anxiety's demands, accidentally injures her old best friend on the ice. She gets sent to the penalty box. And anxiety, desperate to fix the social ruin she has engineered, grabs the console.
It's so hard to watch.
She doesn't just pull a lever. She essentially tapes the gas pedal to the floor. Anxiety starts moving at light speed around the console. She becomes a literal blur of blinding orange electrical energy, pulling every lever, pushing every button simultaneously, frantically trying to calculate a way out of the crisis.
And here we witness the ultimate physiological consequence of totalitarian biological control. The control console freezes. It locks up. Anxiety herself becomes paralyzed, trapped within a vortex of her own frantic, uncontrollable energy.
The host's physical reaction to this is incredibly difficult to watch because this isn't just a teenager getting nervous about a game. This is a clinical panic attack depicted as a total hardware crash. The dictator jams the controls, the software enters a fatal infinite loop, and the hardware Riley's biological body completely locks up.
Complete system failure.
She is sitting in the penalty box. We hear her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She's gasping for air, but she can't breathe. Her hands are gripping the bench. She is physically paralyzed, suffocating under the overwhelming, crushing sensation of, I am not good enough.
It is the ultimate endpoint of biological determinism. The human body, the meat puppet, is left completely helpless, abandoned to a malfunction in the software. It proves, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the conscious subject is entirely at the mercy of the controller. Riley cannot rationalize her way out of the panic attack. Why? Because the very part of her brain that handles rationalization is the thing causing the panic attack. The system cannot fix the system when the system is the threat.
It is devastating. The X-ray shows the jagged white line, but the doctor is the one holding the hammer. And eventually, the crisis breaks. Anxiety realizes she is killing the host, and she lets go of the console. The other emotions finally break out of the vault, they arrive in headquarters, and they pull anxiety away.
Yeah.
And then they all gather around the belief system, they embrace the complexity, the strings weave together to form a multifaceted, nuanced identity. I am a good person, but I can be selfish. I am brave, but I get scared. I need help, but I am strong. The movie presents this as this beautiful, sweeping, emotionally resonant resolution.
It is framed as the ultimate triumph of emotional maturity, a balanced parliament of the mind.
But if we hold the film to the structural reality of the universe, it has spent 2 movies establishing that healthy resolution is a complete and total illusion.
It is mathematically hollow. Because when you analyze the fundamental mechanics of power, nothing has actually changed regarding Riley's autonomy.
A multi-party oligarchy where the citizen has no vote is still a dictatorship. It doesn't matter if there's 1 ruler or 5. They may be sharing the console now. Joy and anxiety and sadness and anger might be holding hands, having a committee meeting, and agreeing on which lever to pull. But Riley is still not the one pulling the lever.
She remains a captive passenger in her own biological vehicle. The deterministic framework remains entirely intact. The chemical commands sent to her muscles are perhaps slightly more balanced, slightly more nuanced now. But the agency, the ability to choose, is still entirely divorced from the subject. Even when the emotions work together in perfect harmony at the end, Riley still has no control. She is trapped on a biological panopticon. The scariest prison in the world is your own mind.
The scariest prison in the world is your own mind. Because you can't even see the bars. The bars are made of your own neurotransmitters. You just feel the commands hit your nervous system, and you desperately tell yourself a story that you chose them. And that leaves me with a final, unnerving concept. Something to mull over that wasn't even strictly in the source text, but is the terrifying logical endpoint of everything we've discussed today.
Let's follow the logic to its end. What is it?
If we accept this deterministic nightmare, if we accept the premise that Riley is just a meat puppet controlled by these homunculi in her head, then we have to ask the next question. What is controlling the emotions? Do joy and anxiety have their own microscopic glowing control rooms inside their heads, filled with tiny sub-emotions pulling their levers?
Oh, wow.
Is there a tiny joy's joy and a tiny joy's anger fighting for control of joy's console? If free will is an illusion for Riley, maybe it's an illusion all the way down into microscopic neurochemical nothingness. It's just turtles all the way down, an endless chain of microscopic puppets just pulling levers in the dark.
An infinite regress of meat puppets. Dennett's nightmare made flesh, stretching down into the quantum foam. It really does force you to reevaluate every single decision you think you make today. When you choose your coffee, when you hug your child, when you get angry in traffic, who or what actually made that decision?
We want to thank you for joining us on this incredibly dark journey. We hope we didn't entirely ruin your childhood love of animation, but we do hope we made you look a little closer at the invisible architecture of your own consciousness. Question the impulses you feel. Look for the hands pulling your strings. Keep diving deep, and we'll see you next time.